Hello everyone, Darren here from Knudsen, and today's video we're going to go through the steps to update the firmware in your echosounder. So at this point in time I've already gone ahead, I've received my software package update. I've gone ahead and installed all of the software portion of it, so I have my new Echo Control client and server icons all on my desktop. Now, one thing everybody has to keep in mind here is when you receive new software, when you go through and install it, it only updates what's on your desktop here. But the second part of this, and probably the more important part of this, is to make sure that you go through the steps to upgrade the firmware in the echosounder itself. If you don't have matching firmware in the echosounder to matching software on your computer, then that could lead to other complications. So at this point in time we've done this. So let's go through and launch our firmware loader. So as you can see, it's not one of the applications that gets put onto your desktop. So if we go to our Windows, open up our Knudsen Sounder Suite USB folder, you will see Firmware Loader here as one of your applications. So let's go ahead and run that. So when the Firmware Loader comes up, the main thing you're going to go to is the upgrades. But what I want to show you here is one of the common misconceptions that people have when they're going through doing a firmware update. If you click on upgrades, load DSP firmware, it comes up with a device ID and it shows you a serial number. Now usually what happens here is I get a call from some people saying the serial number doesn't match my echosounder. Well, it's not going to, because this is going to be the serial number of one of your modules inside of your echosounder. Let me just show you something here first. If you go to Help, Sounder Info, you're going to have a breakdown of all the modules that are inside your echosounder. It may be a single, maybe a dual channel, it may be a quad, 4-channel. In this case I have a dual channel echosounder. So I have two different KEL sounder modules, and this is each one of their serial numbers that you'll see here. There's a tab to toggle between each one. Now the other thing that's good to do when you go through a firmware loader at this point is I always like to check to see what version that's currently programmed into the modules. So you can see here on both my modules it is version 4.7 that is programmed. And if you take note of these two serial numbers here, when you go back to upgrades, DSP firmware, there's a drop down menu and you'll see these two serial numbers are the same two serial numbers that we just looked at before. So this is just the serial numbers of the modules inside. So let's go ahead first and we'll pick one of our modules. You'll have to go through when you update this firmware, and you have to do it for each of the individual modules. You can't just do it once. So we got to make sure that we keep track of which ones we're doing as we go through. So we'll select our first one, hit OK. It's then going to go through and point directly to the folder that has the firmware installed in it. So you can see it's our Sounder Suite USB folder, which is located in our program x86 folder, if you remember back to a previous video. So at this point we'll go ahead and we'll point at our bin file and we will hit open. So it's going to go through and switch over to a firmware loading mode, and it's going to come up and give you basically another chance here to make sure that this is what you want to do. So this is just a warning that comes up to make sure that you want to continue. Big thing to remember here, where it says please do not shut off the unit or you may lose functionality, that could very well happen, and I'll show you as we go through where the problem is there. So let's go ahead and hit yes. So as you can see here, the first thing it does is it goes through and erases all of the previous information that's in that device right now. This is where the problem would come into play if you lost communication or power at this point, because basically your program would be blank. So the first step that it goes through is actually erases all the device memory. Then it's going to go through and it's going to start to program our new information into it. So this will just take a couple of minutes to go through onto each module. But as I said, you want to make sure that each one of these steps are completed properly. It's going through, it's verifying the new contents in the memory device, and success. Firmware upgrade process has completed successfully. So at this point here, what we want to do is we want to go back to upgrades, back to our load DSP firmware, and let's go down and let's select the second module. Okay, same bin file again. And we're going to get asked the same warning question again. So yes, we would like to proceed. So again, it's going through that same steps again where it clears all the memory that's currently in the second module. It's going through and then reprogramming the new bin file that you've provided to it. And then after this, it'll go through that same step again of verification. So once this is all done, the next step that we want to do is we want to cycle the power on the echosounder to make sure that this is actually going through. But again, we want to make sure everything's gone through and it's finalized before we shut the power off. So at this point here, the second channel has gone through successfully and it's already completed. So we're going to hit OK. We're going to close our firmware loader. Now at this point, you want to cycle the power on your echosounder. Depending on your configuration, you may hear that beep, and that's just your USB communication going offline and then back online. So at this point, let's relaunch our firmware loader again. Now, if we go back to the menu under the Help, Sounder Info, if you remember previously, the channel modules both were at version 4.07. So now we can see that both of our modules have now been upgraded to the new version 4.09. As I said, this is a very good thing to check afterwards, because what you want to have is you want to make sure that they have both programmed. You don't want to have one module at one vintage and the second one at a different vintage. So in this case, both of them are upgraded, we're at our new version, and we're ready to go with our upgraded version of SounderSuite.